like to invite our distinguished guest speakers, Professor Lodaya, from India, but he's currently in US, and he's joining us from Santa Fe. I believe it is 10 p.m. in Santa Fe right now, and I deeply appreciate your support for this event. And Professor Mustafa from Bangladesh, Miss Arora from India, and Professor Jacob from India. Each guest speakers will talk for about 15 minutes. I will then open for questions from the floor. So I'd like to request you, the audience, several things before we begin. Please keep your mic mute so that we can hear the speaker well. And please feel free to write comments and questions in the chat box below. We will later on have the discussion session, but if you could post it on the chat, it will be easier for us to organize. Of course, you can directly ask questions during the discussion session. Lastly, SARC will be recording this symposium, which will be open for public on our homepage. So if you do not wish to be in the video, please switch off during this session. So without further ado, I would like to ask President Ryohei Tanaka to give our welcome address. Professor Tanaka.
Yes. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone present here from around the world. Can you see me? So we are very happy to welcome your participation today at the South Asia Research Center Online International Symposium on New Education During Pandemic 2020. I would especially like to thank the guest speakers, Professor Arvind Lodaya, Professor Mustafa Kamal Azad, Ms. Silky Arora, Ms. Megha Jacob, who have taken out time out of their busy schedules to be here with us today. Thank you very much. Soka University is striving towards contributing to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals announced by the United Nations in 2015. Goal 4 is ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. With online learning and new methods of study becoming more popular as a result of the pandemic, it is time to explore new possibilities in the sphere of education. Through discussing today's theme, let us try and move a step closer toward achieving this goal. One of the founding principles of Soka University is to be the highest seat of learning for humanistic education. The founder, Daisaku Ikeda, explained humanistic education as fostering individuals who create value for their own life and for society. I hope that through today's session, we are all able to sow seeds to create value in our current state, better ourselves, and contribute vibrantly to society in whichever way possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tanaka. Now I'd like to ask Professor Mukesh Williams to introduce the theme and speakers. Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor Teramoto and Professor Tanaka for introducing our university and the speakers. I know all the speakers here, and I'm very happy to see them. Professor Lodaya, I know him for many years, and he is an innovative architect and teacher. So it's a great pleasure to have him here. Professor Mustafa is very senior in Bangladesh, and he has many wonderful ideas about education. And he is one of the greatest things. He's got a great passion for learning and teaching. Silky Arora is also a great innovator because she's very much connected with NGOs, and her style of thinking and her way of doing learning is very different from academics. So I really value her contribution and her presence here. It's a great change, and it's wonderful to listen to her. Megha Jacob is the youngest, so we placed her last, which doesn't mean she should be last. She should have been first, but she's got a lot of ideas. She's very enthusiastic, and she holds the future of education for us. So with that, I would like to begin. There are many more things to say about them. They're wonderful people, and I'm well connected with them, and I'm proud to be friends with them. And I'm proud that they are connected now to Soka University. So Soka University is a great institution. I've worked with Soka University for so many years, and it is at the forefront of connecting people and creating value, as Tanaka Sensei mentioned. So we are very keen to create value and to find new ways of connecting human beings. So with that, let me begin with the theme of today's meeting. So my business is to do three things. First, to explain the importance of the theme. Second, to identify key issues that exist or will emerge. Third, to suggest the traversed and untraversed paths, the paths we have gone on and the paths we will go on. So these are the three things I would like to say in this brief introduction. Number one, the Greek symposium was a drinking party. The modern symposium is a subject discussion. Discussion means taking or talking to reach a decision or exchange ideas. So in this symposium, we will move in the direction of exchanging ideas. The pandemic, which is COVID-19, has transformed education, and it has shaken us to the core of our being. The global middle class has shrunk by 50%, and the international students are vanishing. The middle class was the factory for creating international students. Half the world does not believe in social distancing or mask. Medical protection is next to nothing. Many universities are gone or merged. We are online, but want to be hybrid. Hybrid is half online and half face-to-face. A hybrid teaching qualifies for governmental recognition, for visas and degrees. The method of teaching is now directly connected to forgetting the pandemic and remembering the impact of communication. As the fundamentals of survival are recognized, the nature of knowledge and methods of imparting education has changed too. All academic activities are now reduced to digital interaction or pre-recorded lectures. A new sympathy for inadequate human interaction and human failing has compromised much of the academic rigor. Point number two, we need to connect the tools of technology with the purpose of education. Soka University always emphasizes the purpose of education. We do not have the technological will to create education. except global wars and viruses. Both have changed the world and educated us in very painful ways. Education perpetuates old stereotypes, which have become the DNA of cultures and nations. See the world and you will understand. Symbols have become reality and control our social and individual behavior. Education must find new methodologies, new technologies, and new intellectual trajectories to maintain psychological, physical, and intellectual health. My point number 3. Today, technology tools in education have become the pedagogy of education itself. I want to repeat this. Today, technology tools in education have become the pedagogy of education itself. Video conferencing tools have become the new education model. Zoom and WebEx have given a new value to video communication in education by creating virtual and expanded global classrooms. They have created virtual tutoring, career counseling, and study halls to go beyond the classroom. Go beyond the classroom has a promising ring, but means nothing. It is possible to create and host video lectures to allow students to learn at their pace. It again means nothing. It means you can wake up whenever you want. These are terrible words. They assume too much and give us nothing. We know everything, but we do not do. Our mind does not listen to our body. We have not trained the body to control the mind. We need to develop technologies of the body. Point number 4. I just have 2 more points, so have some patience. I'm not going to speak more. Number 4, we must evolve technology of the self to connect with technology of communication. There are many reasons why know thyself has obscured take care of yourself. We arrange everything in a certain manner and call it academic culture. We create universal values, canonical works, and ways of behaving and transmit through language. Communication is not about language or information, but interaction between energies of life. Individuality is a small part of life. Communication implies that the other should get it. Online is also communication. Talking and texting is also communication. It keeps us distracted, not fulfilled. It keeps us distracted, not fulfilled. Education is to connect, to enter within life. Do we live consciously or compulsively? If we live compulsively, we will repeat ourselves. It means the past rules our present, affecting our future. Once we live consciously, the past rules will not repeat themselves. The past will not repeat itself once we live consciously. Then we can communicate with the universe effectively. Technology has created fantastic tools to communicate. The internet has made most processes available to us. The Internet of Things will bring together all gadgets under our control, creating new possibilities and new dangers. Can we use them to create life? And the last point, teachers help others to acquire knowledge and generate values amongst their students. There is a close relationship between teachers' knowledge, method of instruction, and what the student finally gets. The kind of students they were, that is teachers, the teachers who taught them, and what they study shape their teaching technique. A good teacher is one who comes to class well prepared, cares for his students, gives them values, is passionate, and teaches effectively. He uses rhetoric and anecdote to convince his students. All of us will say, we know this, but why does the world not change? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Williams. It is our great concern right now to seek the new method to provide education, not educational service, using this very new technologies. So I personally am hoping to learn from these guest speakers today, their approach, how they approach to this new situation. Before we move on to speeches, lectures, I'd like to share with the audience one small thing. During the session, if you have any issue, please let us know by sending chat. I have SARC written before my name, SARC Teramoto, and there is one more staff, Miss Tushita Arora, who is helping us. So we both have SARC written in front of our names. Please send me a chat if you have any problem and needs our support. Okay. Now, I'd like to ask Professor Arvind Lodaya to share his insight.
Sure. Please give him a big hand because we really welcome him. He's 10 o'clock there, and with all the difficulties, he's been able to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I actually need the to share the screen.
Amita Senseko, hello.
Yes, that's done. So let me just quickly start there. And there we have it. Right. Thank you, everyone. Professor Williams, of course, and other colleagues for having me here. What I plan to do is to quickly share my thoughts about new directions for education, learning from my own pandemic experience as well. The first thing is that regardless of the pandemic, we cannot and must not lose sight of the bigger and very serious reality that we exist in, that our planet's health is in a very poor, critical condition, and it really needs emergency care. Let us not forget this for an instant. Let us also accept and confront the cause for this, that we are trapped in a destructive cycle of consumption, pollution, inequality, and climate change of our own making. We educators have to answer for this. The question is, have we really been part of the solution or the problem? And I'm afraid the answer is not very flattering. Here, I'm reminded of the great Brazilian educator Paulo Freire and his masterpiece book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Freire's analysis and action framework remains as relevant today as when he wrote the book way back in the 1960s. His main thesis was that education, as is practiced typically, basically works to dehumanize us, which is to remove us from our humanness, because, as he put it, it serves the agenda of the oppressors. And it's only by rehumanizing it that we can achieve our true potential as human beings. But just as we had lost all hope, the pandemic has actually thrown up some wonderful, almost miraculous indications of hope and change. So the question before us is, will we change only because we are forced with a gun to our head? Or can we educate ourselves to accomplish it? I believe we can and must educate and re-educate every person, young and old, to become a proactive and well-informed steward of our planet. using a kind of four-dimensional approach which covers citizenship, scholarship, entrepreneurship, and leadership. The four ships, as I call them. And I mean that this is imparted to every individual in all the four dimensions. Coming now to our pandemic experience. This is how our screens look like these days. In one word, education now equals digital. And we must compliment and thank everyone, teachers, students, technicians, administrators, everyone, for achieving this transition so rapidly, although not very seamlessly. Some people glorify online education as self-learning, but that does not hide the underlying gaps and cracks. Even poor countries like India have moved education to the internet and also television and radio, but it remains highly inaccessible for a huge chunk of its population. Not only the poorest, but also girls, the sick, the malnourished. Our school system also provided meals, free meals to a lot of the students who attended the schools. That has completely stopped now. Or those who have to labor to help the family survive the economic crisis, which is caused by the pandemic. My own work from home story is actually much more comfortable. Being an independent practitioner, nothing has changed very much, except that with universities migrating online, they are becoming more open to having a long distance, a remote professor. I actually have been busier in the last 2 months than in the previous 6 months. My pandemic experience has been extremely rich. On one hand, I mentored a group of students who developed a game enabled at encouraging young people to become community leaders in the effort against the virus. Another internship, a digital internship that I was heading, was with a group of students who were developing a detoxification app, which was in 3 dimensions, physical, digital, and mental, which was inspired by none other than Japan's famous guru of minimalism, Marie Kondo. Here in New Mexico, I have been advising a group of architecture students on how to continue their fieldwork on community-based urban planning and design projects. Because digital inequity exists here as well, we were forced to explore analog ideas for community engagement and participation, such as community notice board, printed newsletter, physical models, and board games, many of which I dug out of my experience in India, where no media access was available and all fieldwork had to be done in person. In some way, my experience of online teaching in the recent past brought back the writings of Ivan Illich in my mind, especially his thesis on conviviality. As with Paulo Freire, they strike a chord even today, maybe stronger than ever. Here is my analysis of the online learning and teaching experience. It's a work in progress as it is still ongoing and inputs are still coming in. I'm not going to read out all the points, but you can glance through it and you can see that it's a mixed bag, and many attributes that make it appealing and effective also work against it. I have highlighted in yellow those which I feel particularly concerned about or impressed by. I found my main concerns were the same as those of Freire, which is dehumanization, and Illich, which is conviviality. This is a survey of educators looking ahead after the pandemic, and the findings are interesting that equity can no longer be ignored, that physical location will no longer be the default, that students will have more freedom and flexibility to make up their own schedules, that schools and families now understand each other much better and hopefully will support each other much better. And finally, that the measure of success will be less about competency and more about outcomes. So it is progressive in some ways, but is it enough? Is it what we need to develop stewards of the planet? I doubt it. Before you think of me as someone who only lives in the past 1960s, let me share the views of the well-known futurist Yuval Noah Harari, which also strikes a chord with me. He says, change will occur at such a fast pace now, so the best training that we can give students is to detect change and adapt, rapidly relearn and reinvent their lives. He also says students need to develop spiritual self-awareness and resilience as the only constant in these times of change, which appeals to me a lot. I only wish he had also included our planet's future in his forecast. What Harari predicts, and I will second that, is that algorithmization is spreading into every walk of life, even teaching. Most jobs that can be automated will be. And the pandemic has only accelerated this process. Therefore, most industrial jobs that we are skilling our students for are likely to disappear altogether. The only way out is to adapt, improvise, and be your own boss. In other words, companies are shedding human workers and instead turning to casual labor contracts. Of course, this is promoted as something very cool, the gig economy, and enabling young people to lead a fun and rapidly changing life. But the bottom line is that our youth are being pushed to fend for themselves with no security or stability. Therefore, I foresee project-based learning as all set to become the dominant pedagogy, with its distinct benefits in terms of analytical and creative ability, integration of personal, social, and environmental perspectives, increased student agency and self-reliance, professional and employability and entrepreneurial skills, collaboration rather than competition, and other attributes. Project-based learning shares many attributes with the design process, and since I'm a designer and educator, I'd like to share a few insights here that I hope would be useful to you. One core principle is empathy. I believe we know very little about our students and would learn a lot if we ventured into their reality, which could mean digital. Indeed, we need new ways to access and process the digital experience, as our existing ways are obsolete and possibly even regressive. Extreme users are those who are not the average in the center of the bell curve, but who are found in the narrow ends of the curve. They offer unexpected but amazing insights and inspiration. Here is one such which I discovered. Somebody who attended a funeral in the family over video, over live streaming, and describes a most moving and transforming experience. I had never thought, frankly, that that kind of a deep, profound experience would be really possible over digital media. Another key attribute of the design process applicable to project-based learning is not to learn in abstract, but through applied projects or prototypes that integrate theory with application and disciplinary knowledge with multidisciplinary outcomes. Here is a young American 17-year-old student who built an information website on coronavirus that has become a worldwide reference. He also gained a huge monetizing potential, which he did not accept. This potential for creativity and entrepreneurial leadership is what makes project-based learning so exciting for me personally. In fact, in many universities in America, design thinking has even been applied to mapping, exploring, and navigating career and life pathways. One of the assumptions it makes us challenge is that we have only one ideal life that we need to discover and somehow attain. Instead, it encourages us to explore many lives, many exciting and great lives that we can nurture and choose the one that is the most attainable at a given point in time. It also pushes us to ask what kind of life we may wish for if money and status were not an issue. Which reminds me of the Japanese custom or practice of ikigai, which of course is about designing a life that is harmonious and joyful. And that reminds me of an ancient model, a timeless model of a learning community, which we call ashrams in India, which provide integrated, holistic, and sustained education and prepare young people for adulthood and citizenship. Project-based learning and design thinking can comfortably be placed in such a learning model. I myself have had the privilege of spending 6 years of my youth in a similar learning environment. I wonder if it is possible to recreate the ashram in a modern sense, combining its deep wisdom and power with the affordance of modern technology and, of course, progressive values. On that note, I will take your leave. I thank you once again for your attention and your kindness. I look forward to a fruitful and inspiring seminar, and I hope we can meet again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lodaya, for sharing very interesting ideas about how the education could be in the future. As I've mentioned in the beginning to the audience, please feel free to write down comments and questions in the chat box. We will have a discussion session at the end of this symposium. Now, I would like to invite Professor Mustafa to share his opinion on post-corona education in Bangladesh. Professor Mustafa.
Thank you very much, Professor Taramoto. And I'm very much happy to be here in this very nice gathering of the academics and other scholars, students. So let me share. The sound is audible? It's clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share my slide. Okay. Okay. So this is Professor Mustafa. I'm the Dean of the School of Business, Bangladesh Open University. So today I will try to focus on the things happening in Bangladesh right now, but I don't have that much data yet, because it's a kind of a big transition for the country like Bangladesh, where the people were not that much prepared for this transition, because COVID-19 created a big blow in our education system, in our economy, social life, everything. And you know that the corona problem is not yet over. It is slightly growing, still growing. So in this context, actually, the education is in a very vulnerable condition. Also the production, other things also. So, but one thing was very excellent in Bangladesh, that the government got a very big initiative for digitization of the country. This started in 2008, and government got a digital Bangladesh vision, which was 2021. I don't know, it's not working. Okay, so the digital Bangladesh vision 2021. In that vision, government got 4 pillars. So one was human resource development, connecting citizens, e-governance or digital Bangladesh, and then promoting ICT industry. And government got a perspective plan. So till the 2021. So that in that perspective plan, government put the highest priority on the ICT infrastructure. And that's why we were very much, we can say that ready in terms of the infrastructure. That was good. But the problem was in education, we actually didn't use that infrastructure that much. It is not meaning that we never touched it. Yeah, some universities, and but institutionally, the initiatives were not that much significant. But individually, a lot of professors, teachers, they used technology in their teaching learning process. But just because of this COVID crisis, it is a big shift from that traditional teaching learning process to this online based teaching learning process. So what happened in this time, you see that we suffered a lot for this kind of problems, like this huge unemployment happened, and we are expecting that this will continue even another 2 or 3 years. So the sectors now are dominating the economy will be changed also. We can see that the things here are a little bit different from the existing sectors which are dominating the economy. So the new sectors will create some new jobs. But the question is, whether our education is ready for it or not. So that's the big issue. So we have 53 public universities in the country and 97 private universities. So what is going on? So I'm just focusing a little bit more on my university because this is a very big university in the country. We have the country-wide centers, and we have approximately 600,000 students all over the country. We have 43 formal programs and 19 non-formal programs. So since we are providing or we are addressing a big number of students, and even if we offer the distance education programs, we face the same problem because in distance education, we mostly were dependent on printed materials. So that's why when we shifted and we had some face-to-face tutorial sessions also. So when this problem came, then we were, as a whole, the university were a little bit stuck with this kind of transition process. But at my faculty, the School of Business, since we used to use some technologies in very maybe low scale, we started to think how to redesign our learning process. Just before 2 or 3 years, the COVID came. That's why we were a little bit prepared mentally. So at my faculty, we instantly switched to online education, and we had some use of technologies. But when COVID started from the beginning, we didn't stop any classes, any interaction with the students, nothing, because we were a little bit prepared for that. But for other universities, they are still struggling because especially the face-to-face universities, they are still struggling because they are in a dilemma whether they should go online or they should wait to go back to their previous condition. But the business school here, what we did, actually we switched from this model, which is just acquiring knowledge, which was very much practiced maybe 100 years back, that we need to acquire knowledge, then we will get a job, because future was very much predictable. Then another model we saw, which is learn to work. That means if we learn, I mean, knowledge is not enough, we must have skill and attitude together, then learning will happen, then it is good for having the job. Still, the future was mostly predictable. So if you go back 50 years from now, the future was mostly predictable. But what happens now? The whole picture is different. We don't know what is our future. At our study life, in our study life, we found that whatever we are learning, we had a target that after my graduation, I will join in that job. But now the students, university students, they don't know where they will go. So the learning should not be like this previous one. We should not follow these previous models. We have to go to this model, work to learn, and that is our basis. Because I mentioned here the fundamental truth of education. So whenever I think of education or think of anything, I try to understand the fundamental truth. So fundamental truth of education is learning. Fine, in the beginning, maybe learning was enough, just learning some particular skills was enough. But now, I think the learning some particular skills will not be enough. We have to learn how to learn, because the situation in near future, we don't know actually where will be a place and how we will go. The path will not be that much easy. So that's why we are emphasizing on the continuous learning. That means it is very it's messy process of learning. So maybe we have to engage and we have to discover, experiment, and we have to create, apply. So every stage we have to learn. So work to learn, here work means in my understanding work means be involved. So being involved is enough, important at this stage. So we must be involved. The students must be involved. And what we are doing based on this philosophy, what we are doing at this business school. Actually, the big shift happened, the teaching mode to learning mode because of this COVID problem. So when we use online, then if our mindset is still that teaching in that direction, I mean teaching mode, it will not work. What I believe that we must shift our mindset. It must be shifted from teaching mode to learning mode. So when we talk about the learning mode, learner engagement is important. And when we start from the fundamental truth of education, then if we scale up, then maybe the debate between, still the debate is going on, especially in Bangladesh. So where to go? Should be even the top policy making level, also they are confused. Should we wait to go back, or we have to use, or we have to transform to this the online education system, or we have to go for a blended system? So now at this stage, we don't have any option. We have to be online. But after that, maybe we will have some blended system. But the problem is, when we will use any kind of online resources or on any kind of online platform, we must think that the teaching mode will not that much appropriate in this case. Learning mode is enough. So learner must come to the center of everything. So the contents will share. The main another challenge is, when we go online, the contents previously shared was, that in the developing countries, usually we follow the books written by the American or European authors. But the problem is, those books were available in the market, maybe in some cases photocopied books, etc. But when we will go online, so the copyright becomes a big issue. So what kind of resources we will use? So we are emphasizing clearly on OER. So our colleagues and the university is emphasizing on OER, so that we can avoid this copyright issues. So when we share online, so we cannot go for this kind of highly copyrighted books, and our students doesn't have access to the copyrighted books also, because they are very much expensive. And as contents, we started to use the localized cases, very much local cases. And the open data, because we are preferring open data because of the reason is, so open data, we have, our students have access to this data, so the free access to this data, and these are latest ones, so we can easily use these things. Open sources are also, and MOOCs. So in our current design, we are now planning to incorporate some MOOCs. That means in a course, the students will get some marks for example, as assignment, if they complete the MOOCs. So for some courses, we are just trying to embed this kind of MOOCs. So they will complete the MOOCs, and they will show the certificate, and they will get the assignment score. And what should be the approach? So in our approach, face-to-face system was there previously. Now we created some career clubs, so different career clubs. So our focus is the third option, what we mentioned, I mentioned in the previous slide, that the students must learn how to learn. So that's why the career clubs will be led by the students. So we are just organizing the students. They will lead this career clubs, maybe public speaking, maybe digital marketing, whatever it is. They will get the skills by themselves. And a mentorship program. So I have been attached to Professor Kuntal also. He helped me to develop this the framework for the mentorship program. So we are thinking that the students, we will start from next week. We hope that the students will take now we'll pilot, and then we'll embed it into our program. So the mentorship program, in mentorship program, students will learn. They will be skilled enough to be a mentor. So what they will do, they will develop the social enterprises, because we know that after COVID, I already showed that the sectors will be little bit changed. The demand area will be changed. The skill area will be changed. So that's why we are thinking that the social enterprise will be the focus. The students will develop the social enterprise. So we will go through this mentorship program. And academia industry collaboration, we still have this collaboration, but we are going to strengthen these things. And we have a open business talk. It is going on. And these are now we are in the faculty, we are doing this, but we are just expanding it to the students. So it will happen very soon. And the assessments, we are emphasizing on more formative assessments, more homework, more forum discussions, more assignments, etc. And these are the face-to-face sessions, so we are not using these things. And a single grade, some skill courses, so we are just going to impose some skill courses. This will be the single grade, not A plus, A, or so they will must have A plus, otherwise they will sit again. We will give them the chance, but this specific skill areas, they must got full competency. And peer assessment. So these are the ways we are trying to engage our learners and assess our learners. And this, of course, the challenge is there. The mindset change is very difficult. Still, it is going on. Infrastructure is good, but the rural area, still they are struggling. And pedagogical rigidity, so which is very difficult. People cannot shift. They don't like to shift from teaching more to learning more. So they are trying to, they are trying to create a replica. So the teaching, the classes, face-to-face classes into the digital classes. So it's kind of replica they are thinking. So they are not understanding the pedagogical shift. So they are not changing their mindset. That is another problem. And slow adaptability, of course, and more focus on classes. Still, they are using the conferencing tools like Zoom and Google Meet or some other tools. And they are focusing on the one-way delivery. The learners are not engaged that much. And also, so our basis is mostly the dynamic learning design. So we are trying to change the learning design depending on the changes. So that's why it is not difficult for my faculty to adjust, because we are used to that. And we said that free technologies and low-cost technologies we are preferring. We are not running for that high-end technologies, etc., sophistication or some high-end technologies. And mainstreaming the technology urban learning. So that's why we said the open business talk we started. So it has been started 3 years back. So now it is going on, and the webinars are going on within the teachers and within the students. And we are going to develop some policies also, because otherwise it will not work. So these are the things actually we are now doing at my faculty. And since I said that it is a very big shift, and still the public universities and face-to-face universities are a little bit confused whether they should shift to the new system or not. So that's why we don't have that much data. So I just shared my experience at my faculty mostly. And of course, the private universities in Bangladesh, they shifted a lot. So they started to use the online classes and online platforms. So the most important thing is we are not going back to the previous mode anyway. That is our determination. And also the government decided not to go back to the previous mode fully. So they said the online platforms, online education must be accompanied with this face-to-face education system. So government is also, they are going to develop a policy, and maybe very soon we will get the policy. And that's why we said that since the OER is available everywhere, you know that a lot of repositories are there. So we don't worry to use the OER. So it is good for us. It is the best opportunity created for us that we can use OER, and we can engage the learners more than before. So if we design the learning very well. So the strategies we mentioned, that we are going for some top-down strategies, and bottom-up is there, and inside out also, which we call mainstreaming. So these are the things also going on. So at the end, actually, what I believe, and I think that Abhijit Banerjee, the Nobel laureate, he said that tech-based education is completely scalable, and there is no reason to reinvent the wheel. Models already exist. So I strongly believe in this, and that's why the transition actually was not that much longer for my faculty, because we were believing in this kind of things, that the tech-based education can be maintained with a certain level of quality, especially if you look into the future needs or 21st century needs. If you focus on learning, then I think online education is a kind of blessing for us. So we always try to see this in this direction. And also Amartya Sen said that if we keep the mass people of the world outside the orbit of education, we make the world not only less just but also less secure. So with this kind of beliefs, we are just now trying to increase the scale of our teaching learning process so that we can achieve our goals. So up to now, that's all from me. Maybe in the discussion session, I can share some more ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mustafa, for sharing with us the current situation of higher education in Bangladesh, which we hardly know in Japan. And now I'd like to ask, I would like to ask Miss Arora to share her point of view on this reimagining learning. Miss Arora.
Thank you, Wei. And thank you, Professor Mustafa, for setting a base for me for the learning mode, because that's something that I feel very interested in. And unlike you and Professor Arvind, I do not have strategies and holistic plans and approaches for how to approach education. But on the other hand, I have some stories and reflections of how the core of learning needs to be understood for me before stepping into the planning. So for me, that's something that has mattered a lot, that what we are creating, what's going, the idea behind it needs to be revisited every time. Every single stage we cross, it needs to be revisited. So like any other story goes, I'll begin this story also in the same way. Many years back, I was designing a restaurant, and I was at the site, and there were contractors, electricians, so many other people, and I was the designer of that restaurant. And I had gone there to select the colors for the walls, the colors for the furniture, for the upholstery. And while I was doing that, I came across another man in the room. He was the electrician. He was the electrical contractor's person. And for some reason, I started observing this person, and there was a line of thought that was running in my mind, that this man over here has all the technical know-how, has all the knowledge for what he needs to do. So do I. I understand design, I understand color, I understand aesthetics. Now, at the same time, if the man is being paid X amount for an hour, I am being paid 4X for an hour of my time. Why is that so? That was the question that I came back home with. And upon reflection, I kind of started understanding this whole repayment model. Somewhere I call it, or I put this term in my question as repayment model. That besides having known all the technicalities, all the knowledge that he needs, and besides the fact that a space like a restaurant can still run without a wall, without a color, without a prominent color, but without electricity, no. His job is far more important than mine, but I get paid 4 times that man. Why is that so? And it just struck me that maybe it has its roots in this whole repayment model that I have invested, my parents, my teachers have invested a lot for me to get educated and come to this stage. I'm thankful and I'm glad. However, this whole system has its own, I would say, twirls and twists, because of which these realities come up. And this whole experience kind of struck with me, and it pushed me into the space to understand what exactly is learning. And I started contemplating that what I'm receiving through my school and colleges, is that learning or is that knowledge? Because these are two different things, connected but very different. Nowhere I want to say that schools and colleges are redundant, but can we say, because since my understanding of learning comes from the space which has evolved over time with the help of many people around me, that learning is nothing but making sense of the world by experiencing it fully. That's about it. No other. I feel I've been part of many such systems where creativity, leadership, collaboration, co-creation, all of these things are taken to students as a packaged material, as a skill set to be acquired. It's a very common, I would say, activity. I've been also a part of those activities many times in the recent past. But I've come to a stage to kind of realize that something like creativity, leadership, co-creation, all of these aspects are something that we're already born with. The systems in which we start to learn or attain knowledge, they slowly remove these from us. And after a stage, we need to bring them back, and again back through the education system, which in the first place had taken them away from us. Because when a child is born, the child is capable of learning so much, from walking to talking to making sense of what's happening around, to be so sensitive, to be able to realize that what is danger, what is not. We all know that children have these senses that they can understand that which person do they like, they can trust, they have those sensibilities. So if we are such strong sensing beings and we are born creative, we are born with these qualities of cooperation, with these qualities of co-creation, and even we hear a lot about cognition, bringing back cognition, and one of the very trending words is experiential learning. And to which my response is that what is it? What really is experiential learning? It is the only way. We don't have to, because that's the only way. Experience is the only way to learn. Books and other people, they give us perspectives, not knowledge, not wisdom. These are perspectives. And again, this brings me to another aspect of our belief system, that when we say, if we are reading a quote from someone who's very learned, very knowledgeable, very old, we kind of have that respect in our hearts and say, this must mean something valuable. And what we end up doing is we forget to question the curiosity that we've had as a child. Those, when they get lost during all these years of growing up, they kind of need to be kindled back to our life. And it's very dear to me to kind of touch upon this aspect of how the rural tribal communities, the indigenous communities, how not only they are in a physical sense resilient, but also in a mental sense very resilient. For instance, it's something to look at, like how even something like death is seen in these communities. To be able to recover, to be able to come out of that grief, to be able to move on, it's much easier in the rural tribal communities. Why is that so? This is a question I think I have reflected on for long, and I would also request everyone here to look at it. Why are these differences being felt? There is something going on in terms of experiences and the learning that comes through the experiences, and the belief systems that are being created all around us. If we maybe, I would like to leave everyone with these two questions: that what do we believe in, and how do we believe, or maybe why do we believe? Because a lot of our beliefs are borrowed. We have got them as legacy. We have received them as texts, as language, and unconsciously we are carrying them with us all the time. So I want to re-emphasize this need and understanding of what learning is at its core, what it is. Is it about attaining something? If that is so, that's knowledge. So how do we differentiate between these two and have these learning systems as natural and free-flowing as possible, and build on the knowledge systems? If schools and colleges were to be called as knowledge systems, that somehow comforts me. But learning is an activity which is so natural, it cannot be taught, it cannot be given, it can maybe be facilitated, but not taught. And I think I'm also kind of, before I go, remembering this one very minute detail of a reflection, a learning that I had in terms of language. I mentioned language, and for instance, a lot of our schools, colleges, at least in India, I've noticed there's a lot of emphasis on English as a language. Children are, from the beginning, even till their college, their master's level, they're kind of pushed into expressing themselves in English because that's a well understood language. But what it does is it completely crosses or completely eradicates the whole purpose of sharing. So the sharing needs, the step one is, if I am sharing, the step one for me is to be able to express what I want to. Step two is for someone else to understand what I'm sharing. But what happens is, in the current learning knowledge systems, education systems, step two becomes a more important aspect, that it needs to be understood. What you're saying needs to be understood. Whereas the more important aspect is what I feel needs to be shared well. So it can be in any language. Translations are possible. So this is a very minute aspect, but this exactly is my point, that in terms of understanding learning, we have to go much, much deeper into what learning actually is. It is just experiencing life in its natural form. And for knowledge, we can have many structured, very well planned, strategized sources. So let's think about what we believe in and why do we believe in it. And we'll have many answers to many things in life, not just education and learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Arora, for sharing us this very crucial topic of how we can restructure the learning style and how we can create a new knowledge system to really learn. It is an important question to think about, and we would like to discuss about this in the discussion session. Thank you very much. Now we would like to hear from Professor Megha Jacob, who is an assistant professor in Jesus and Mary College in Delhi. She'll be sharing a talk on new methods of teaching in India during COVID-19. Professor Jacob.
Thank you, Dr. Yui, for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Soka University, for having me here, and it's wonderful to be amongst you all. Thank you, Ms. Silky Arora, for sharing your wonderful and thought-provoking experiences with all of us. It was really wonderful to hear you. I mean, it just brought out all the childhood experiences that I personally had, so it was really good. And it was also wonderful to hear all the speakers before me sharing their views on our symposium topic, that is the new education during COVID in different parts of the world. So I'll be speaking, like Dr. Ui said, on the new methods of teaching in India during COVID-19. But I will be primarily sharing my personal experience at the University of Delhi, where I'm working as an assistant professor in the Department of Economics. My experience has been a mixed bag, where along with the challenges, a world of opportunities have opened up. I would like to touch upon three key aspects. First, the new changes and challenges witnessed in the teaching-learning process in the University of Delhi. Second, a gradual transition towards self-learning by students during this pandemic. And finally, how have we as educators supported our students in adopting the new methods of teaching? And what more can be done to address the challenges that students face? Prior to the pandemic, the University of Delhi had been following a traditional classroom-based teaching-learning approach. With the advent of pandemic, a greater use of technology became inevitable, which has forced all the stakeholders, including the administrators, teachers, and students, to gradually accept this change and to brace for the new situations that can possibly arise out of that change. Initially, a larger section of the Delhi University teaching community started to cope with the lockdown by sharing their notes with the students through college web portals, WhatsApp messages, Google Classroom, PowerPoint presentations, with voice recordings as well as video recordings. A small fraction of teachers ventured to use web platforms like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, and Google Meet. A major change that was witnessed across the university colleges was the hosting of webinars on e-platforms. Taking the example of my very own college, in the months of May and June, Jesus and Mary College conducted close to 25 webinars. This gave the teaching community greater confidence to gradually change their method and their style of teaching. More teachers started adopting web platforms which are much more interactive to deliver their lectures. Prior to the lockdown, although the government of India had launched several digital initiatives in higher education like Swayam as well as EPG Pathshala, that's basically for free online courses, Swayam Prabha for free direct to home, that is a TV channel for education, National Digital Library of India, virtual classes through radio, virtual labs, that is to provide remote access to labs in different disciplines of science and technology, and e-yantra, that is mainly to promote robotics in universities. But remember that their utilization by both students as well as teachers was actually limited. However, the pandemic has broken the strong aversion to e-learning that existed prior to the lockdown. And this is my personal observation. Now, students who have internet access are slowly becoming comfortable learning online. Students have gone from being more dependent on teachers to becoming self-sufficient units of learning. Education has also become more holistic, with focus on physical as well as mental health along with the standard academic learning. What is emerging, my dear friends, today is a new education system. Just as there are two sides to a coin, we are witnessing several major challenges to this new emerging education. To get a better perspective on this, I had conducted a sample survey comprising of around 140 students from different disciplines as well as different colleges of the University of Delhi in the month of May. A few challenges that were mentioned by these students, I would like to highlight a few of them, were as follows. Firstly, lack of uninterrupted internet connection. Now you see, since the lockdown, a lot of students have gone back to their hometowns in both rural as well as urban areas of the country, and not all areas have access to good internet connectivity, especially when it rains. To the extent that one of my students told me that she had to climb a tree in order to get internet connectivity on her phone during one of our discussions. Often some students visit cyber cafes to access internet, which puts them at the risk of contracting COVID-19 virus. Second, privacy and cybersecurity concerns. There have been cases in the University of Delhi where unauthorized people have accessed web classrooms during the initial phases of the online shift. This is especially true during the initial stages post the lockdown. However, most web platforms have improved their security and access control to suit the classroom environment better. Third, online teaching being an imperfect substitute for face-to-face classroom teaching. Now, in the sample that I had collected through the survey, it showed that 58% of students did feel so. Next, difficulty in teaching learning process, especially in courses with lab work like in physics, chemistry, psychology, and in other such disciplines, including in my field, economics, in papers like econometrics, where we have to teach students software models, and sometimes it's hard to give them one-on-one interaction by through online modes of education. It becomes a lot more harder for students as well as teachers. Last, among several other disadvantages or challenges that have been pinpointed, the lockdown has in fact widened the inequality in access to education. A few students even reported to be depressed as they could not afford their own laptops to do online assignments. Despite these challenges, even though the survey was conducted in the initial phases of this online shift in education, around 71% of the students in the survey responded that their perspective about the effectiveness of e-learning has improved since the lockdown. Now, that's a very interesting observation that I could see. Finally, from my personal experience, I would like to touch upon how we as teachers and educators are trying to support our students to the best of our capacity in adapting to these new methods of teaching, and on what more can be done to address the problems faced by our students. Most of us have been guiding our students who reside in remote parts of the country by clearing their doubts over phone calls. We provide short online quizzes post every topic to improve the attention span of students when they are studying with us online. I feel that continuous evaluation becomes all the more important when one is unable to meet their students directly in class. Some of us have been providing students with opportunity to work in research projects by guiding them over phone and through web platforms. This is especially important as students have missed several opportunities for internships during this recent lockdown phase, which is very distressing for them. We have also been continuously helping our colleagues to become accustomed to various online platforms so that teaching can proceed smoothly even in this upcoming new academic session when it begins. Further, we have been encouraging our final year students to go for higher education rather than to enter the job market at this point of time. This is primarily because the economic downturn triggered by COVID-19 has led to higher unemployment rates in the world, globally across, and thus it leaves a larger number of experienced candidates in the job market, leaving fewer opportunities for fresh graduates. So, my experience in Delhi University, especially during the lockdown, has laid bare the wide inequalities that exist in our education system, not just in terms of income, but also in terms of access to technology, which I have come to realize are not exactly the same, which means that we as educators need to work much harder to bridge the gaps, and often the very first step is to acknowledge the problem. This has been my experience adjusting to the new education system during times of COVID-19 in the University of Delhi. Thank you all and keep safe.
Thank you very much, Professor Jacob. I would like to know very much about the online platform for educators, how it has been done or how it has been going on for educators, which is a big issue here in Japan. I hope you'd be able to mention it in the discussion session. We have now the discussion session. We will have this session for about 30 minutes. We have several questions on the chat by Professor Lodaya to Professor Mustafa. Professor Lodaya, would you like to begin with that?
So maybe I think you should talk about the kind of design for a new education system that you had mentioned. Be very interested.
Well, okay, it's just some initial thoughts and ideas. It's not like a formulated proposal whatsoever, but there are a couple of ideas there. One of them is a kind of integrated, multi-pronged emphasis on education, which is not specific to a subject or a discipline or a particular technical skill either, but it aims at sort of developing all aspects of the student's personality. And the overarching goal, regardless of what he or she might be studying specifically, is to produce what we would call an earth citizen, rather than a national citizen or an engineer or whatever it might be, right? And then that becomes like a larger objective within which to locate the specific course or program that the student might be doing. That's one perspective. The second perspective is what I shared in the form of pedagogy, which is the project-based learning method, which is pretty widely used in at least in private schools or very elite schools. But I think it has a lot of potential to go and be applied everywhere, not only at the school level, but also at higher education level, where some of its values, which is basically a kind of integrative project-based learning, which is a combination of studying or acquiring information, but also contextualizing it and applying it in a kind of context, problem-solving context, or addressing some issues from contemporary society or your immediate environment, becomes a kind of way of contextualizing what you have learned. And also it in a sense, as I understand it, it inculcates entrepreneurship and leadership. And I think both of these are important, not just for the sound of it, but because to be completely reliant on corporate jobs is, I think, something we should completely move away from. We should produce or try and aim at building students into autonomous citizens and individuals who can make a living on their own and who don't really need a job in the kind of sense of the term. Obviously, many of them will come from economic backgrounds that is where it is difficult to own your own business or run your own business. But even in terms of collaboratives, cooperatives, and so on, there are other models through which enterprise models, through which another option can be created, which is equally viable and perhaps in some sense more desirable. than a corporate job. I mean, these are some of the ideas that I had thrown up in the course of my reflection. The other, of course, the pandemic specific or digital specific thoughts that I had was drawing on Freire and so on is you know, and the ashram idea is to create a community context for learning as overarching individual accomplishment, individual achievement, individual excellence, and so on, but more in terms of coexistence, harmony, and sort of collaborative value creation as being again larger or more overarching informers. I mentioned at some point in my talk that I had the privilege of you know, learning in an institution like this, which I mean, you should not get stuck by the image of the Buddha sitting under the tree. That is not the kind of ashram I went to. I went to a very ultra-modern institution called National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad in India, which was in fact set up in the 1960s. And it is a completely modern or postmodern kind of an institution in many ways. But it captures some of the values of the ashram model, which is that it's a residential learning program. The faculty and the students live on the same campus, and therefore the interaction is continuous and quite casual all the time. That the learning methodology is close to project-based learning, and a lot of it is hands-on applied work. So it's not just about cerebral or verbal kind of knowledge. It is also about practical and, you know, creative and constructive kind of knowledge. There is engagement with society and with community outside of the campus as well. So many of the elements of what I would refer to in a kind of archetypal sense as the ashram model were manifested. And I think even that has a lot of flaws. I'm not even advocating it as a great success in itself. But I think that some of the, you know, the ideas from there can be taken forward. In fact, I'm quite excited about incorporating the values of digital. And we have heard a lot about how digital has, you know, willy-nilly, sort of, in some sense at least, democratized education in a certain sense, not comprehensively. It has issues, and we will talk about that. But if we can leverage those aspects of digital, which make it affordable, which make it accessible, which make it you know, conducive to autonomous learning, off-site, off-time, and so on, maybe there is a way to create an evolution or an iteration of this ashram idea into something that is you know, yet to come. These are some of the thoughts that I was exploring.
Thank you very much, Professor Lodaya. We have not very much time, so if Professor Mustafa can take about 2 minutes or 3, then we want to come to Silky. Arora, is she about indigenous cultures, how to introduce that into our educational system? So, Professor Mustafa.
Thank you very much. I think I got one question, which is, can digital help drastically reduce cost overhead of education and make it highly affordable? So what I in my slides, I tried to say that we must understand the truth of education, fundamental truth. So if it is learning, so what kind of learning? So the learning for being ready for the future. So if we can identify this, that's fine. But since the future is blurred, that's why we have to learn how to learn. That means we have to adapt. With any situation, we have to adapt. So what type of digital tool I will use, technology will use, it depends on the learning design. I always prefer the learning design. So if we can, for example, in our program, we are believing in horizontal learning. That means students will learn from themselves also, they will be involved in the community works, and they will learn from there. So if that is the process, in that case, use of digital tools will be not that much high. So that much sophistication is also not needed. But sometimes what happens, people are very busy with the platforms. What sophisticated platform we should have, on what kind of video we'll share, what kind of simulation we'll share. So in that case, it becomes definitely expensive. But whatever we are using, if we focus on the learning design, if we can understand what type of learning I want to create for my learner, if that fundamental truth is clear, then if we scale up, then we can find a lot of substitution. So maybe in some cases face-to-face will be needed. Maybe in some cases digital tools or digital technologies can be helped. So sometimes we focus on face-to-face. We try to say that it cannot be a best substitute. So it is not, we don't need to substitutize everything. So that can be a blend. Sometimes maybe face-to-face will work. Sometimes in some other cases, the digital tools and technologies will work much. But it is for sure, it is scalable. Scalable means you can reduce the cost if you don't put high emphasis on the sophistication of the technologies. If you emphasize on the learning design, then it is possible to reduce the cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mustafa. Silky, Arora.
Okay, so about your question was about how to integrate the rural, tribal, indigenous communities into the current education systems. Okay. So my perspectives on this can be very, very different from the other speakers here, and that's exactly what I believe in. And I would like to say that firstly, these communities should be the best way for them to be and for us to be is to leave them untouched. And the only thing that we do to be able to learn from them, to know from them, is to observe them, understand them, and apply those learnings in our life. That's it. I see a lot of times there are these community engagement programs. There is like a flooding of fellowships in the so-called market now, that everyone wants their students to do fellowships and go into rural tribal communities, help them and learn in the process. But what exactly happens is that when a city kid or a city person, adult, goes into an indigenous community, there are these so-called city life aspirations that indigenous people hold. And when that happens, the aspirations of those people start getting aligned to the city people's aspirations. And that's where this difference starts nullifying. And that's how, when we from our perspective want to learn from these communities, we end up infiltrating and adulterating these communities. These can be harsh and strong words, but I feel that the best way to understand, to kind of know that how do they live with unknown, how do they live with uncertainty, how uncertainty and not being able to see the future is okay for them, and that works in their favor. For instance, many people maybe in this call as well would be supportive of the sustainable development goals and plannings. However, my perspective towards any planning which takes 2 to 3 years to happen and is meant for 20 years ahead, somehow it makes me very uncomfortable that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. For instance, all these sustainable development goals are on and hold now because of the COVID situation. We did not know what's going to come up. So this long-term planning and not designing our lives or not being resilient, even designing the education systems for resilience is something that's very important. And that can only happen when learning is seen in its core original content, which is experiencing life. And everything else is knowledge attainment. It's making sense of what has happened in the past. And that is exactly what we can get from the indigenous communities. We can observe them and we can know from them. We can have our own evaluation of belief systems and then adapt it. This is my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much for destroying the cog machine capitalism. Yes, absolutely true. Megha, your take on people should do more learning, studying, not learning in the way that Silky is talking about, but to study more after graduation because they can't find a job.
Professor, so first I'll answer your question before I move on to Professor.
Not mine. These are not mine. These are questions there on the chat.
Right. So what I feel, and that's exactly what we've been telling our students also, because the job markets right now are not very conducive for our fresh graduates to get into the market. So that's why we are in fact telling our students, counseling our students to right now go in for their postgraduate or for any other course that could sort of increase their skills in the long run. Now, when I'm talking about skills, I mean acquiring skills which are more technology centric. One example could be that relating to cybersecurity, which are basically considered to be non-traditional jobs, but they do have potential in the near future, because we are all now operating and the world is migrating into online platforms. So that's one reason why I had suggested this. Now, answering a question that was put forth by Professor Arvind, that is on mental health issues and how the Delhi University is responding to these, I would like to say that our university has been regularly providing us directions on using web platforms, and that's exactly what even our own colleges have been doing. We've been having regular discussions with our students, and in fact IQSC of several colleges have been organizing several webinars with students to have a one-on-one discussion on these web platforms. We've had professional counselors in Delhi University that have been made available on almost 6 days a week, and their timings have been given, their telephone numbers have been given for every college in particular, and these phone numbers are available to both students as well as teachers alike. In fact, in our own college, the IQSC has conducted several training sessions for teachers to mentor our own wards and to train us to tackle their issues in the best personal capacity that we have. In fact, several societies like ICIF on the 8th of July, just recently, we even had a session with a clinical psychologist who could get into the issues that are right now concerning our students regarding exams, regarding their career opportunities, exactly the questions that students at Soka had posed. So now they are all quite terrified and scared into stepping into a new world. So we've had psychologists and clinically trained psychologists as well as teachers coming into the forefront to help them out. In fact, recently the psychology department also had a session on the term life with the screen. So how our students are getting addicted to the screen on different platforms and are not able to, they are often undergoing a lot of depression as well in relation to this lockdown. So I hope I'm answering your questions, Professor Mukesh as well as Professor Arvind.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We still have a little bit time. So if anybody has a comment question, that would be nice. I don't want to take that privilege, but if somebody has a question to anybody, any panelist, to anyone, be nice. But be short and quick. Kuntal, you have something to say?
No, thank you. I think it was wonderful to hear of you, particularly the perspectives that come in. Yes, as Professor Lodaya has pointed out, as Ms. Arora, Professor Mustafa, Megha, Professor Megha, all of them have pointed out. I think it's very important that at this point of time, we need to converge a lot of ideas and culture and meanings of education. Online to indigenous to mental health issues to behavioral changes that we are talking about as a whole of the society. It's pandemic, I think, has given us an opportunity to converge idea which was kind of idea and communities which have been kind of drifting away for last 1 decade or perhaps a little more time. So I feel it's a good opportunity to bring that convergence into picture. And the other thing is that we talk disruption very often for the last few years, but here it is, we have a disruption. Can we use it? Can we utilize it for a better future? I think that's the challenge that we all are facing.
Thank you. Professor Motwani. Thank you for being here, and can you make
yeah. Thank you, Professor Williams. It was a very, I would say, good consultation amongst different kind of perspectives. From, I particularly like the idea of the project learning by Professor Lodaya, is model of ashram-based or immersive and residential kind of, what I don't remember the name. Sonika, what's her name?
Silky Arora, you're talking about?
Silky Arora, yeah. Silky Arora was saying, it's true to some extent that when we learn from indigenous people or communities, we kind of pollute their minds also with our ideas or our lifestyles. At the same time, I would caution her from idealizing the native life. There may be good things and we need to learn from them. And at the same time, there's nothing wrong if they try to adopt our lifestyles. And what I would say is that we have to have a mix of different kind of educational models. What we need to do at this time, because of the pandemic, we have got this break, is to reimagine education. We have been trying to reimagine educational technologies, but not just the technologies. What is the aim of education, like Silky Arora has been pointing out, and how best we can achieve this aim. And it can be a mixture of, at a certain stage in life, people may be doing ashram kind of a hostel-based immersive learning, which may be centering around various projects. At the same time, when we talk about lifelong learning, when you are raising a family, when you are working, you may want to learn new things, which may be skills, which may be your hobbies, or which may be anything that you like doing for a happy life or a more fulfilled life. And that kind of learning may be more online or with these new technologies, because it may not be possible at different ages to be able to leave your home and go and have an immersive kind of education. So we need to think about various models of education. But the first thing is that we need to deliberate, discuss about what are the aims of education. And I agree with you, the aim of education presently is seen only as a producing cogs for the capitalist machine, which needs to be questioned. Though given the economic pressures, most of the young students would like to have an education which prepares them for the job market, but that can't be the sole aim of education. And we need to deliberate. And I think today's webinar was a good attempt at deliberating upon the aims of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Motwani. Yeah, I mean, I like Arvindji's idea of, status quo transformation, but Silky's is much more appealing, is more anarchist, and to destroy the whole system. But yes, that's what we should be doing, because I think when I was 5 years old, I was very happy, but the world transformed me, and at 20, I became really unhappy. So they shouldn't have intervened with me, and I would have been much more creative and happier. But that's how the system is geared from the 19th century, to create the cogs, and everybody's happy, all the cogs are happy, including the parents, the teachers, the seminar, everybody. Oh, my student got a job, We destroyed him. And at 60, he retires, and, another cog is ready to be fitted there. And we make some money and take a loan and buy a house and suffer till we die. We are paying off the loans. So this is the education we are giving. It's really terrible. It's the DNA of modern education, I think. It's the terror. And we are participants. We are the creators of that DNA. I have no solution. But Lodaya Sensei has one, and Professor Mustafa is applying it. And, well, Megha says, don't study. Don't get a job, study. So you see, this is the paradigm. This is the paradigm. And I don't know whether awareness has changed. We've been aware for the last 100 years and nothing has changed. You see the world. So we've been talking, Arvindji and I, we've been talking about people we studied, Paulo Freire and, pedagogy of the oppressed and all kinds of people. But I said to him that these guys never knew what was digital technology and how terrible we have become. So I think
I'm an optimist. I won't say we've become terrible. And about the happiness, whether you were less happy at 20, I probably may have been struggling with things at my 30, but I'm happier at 50 than I was maybe almost as happy as I was at 5.
So we have
5,
hope.
I was really happy.
Right,
Never
Silky,
found that
we
word.
have hope.
Yes, Kuntal.
Sir, you said something which strikes a chord, so I thought I'll speak. You said that we are all aware for last so many thousand years. I often ask these questions to my scientist friends that we have spent so many billions of dollars for talking to aliens. Have we been spending so much of money to talk to a dog on the street? Are we aware of ourselves? Are we really aware of what's around us?
Alien is not hitting back. When it hits back, we are through.
Exactly.
No civilizations have ever been great. So we don't know. We are welcoming them, but we don't know whether they will welcome us.
Professor Kuntal, just following up what you said, so I would like to share my experience. I remember my mother saying during her childhood days, she used to run around with rabbits, dogs, all kind. But here, I've become a dog lover, and when I even feed my the stray dogs in front of my house, my mom-in-law, she's a bit scared. She says, "Oh my God, what if they have COVID or any kind of disease?" So like Professor Mukesh said, somewhere we've lost a lot of things because of the probably the reasons. There are reasons, the kind of lifestyle that my parents had or my grandparents had. A lot more things have come up, biological weapons or diseases. But whatever it is, it has become a lot more. I would say the experiences that we have had during our childhood days that have all gone away, and it's really sad. The fear has gotten into us due to these knowledge that comes in every single day. I don't know if I should use the word knowledge also in the newspapers that are being putting forth different kinds of scientific theory in and out. Today you can't eat sugar because you'll catch diabetes. Tomorrow that's fine. So this is how the theory goes in and off. So I just wanted to add to that comment of yours.
Yes,
So the
we
world has
live
to
in
change,
theories of convenience. Sorry.
No, we know, but we don't do a thing. This is the problem. I think the body needs to be trained more than the mind. We don't have technologies of the body. Foucault, Arvindji, you mentioned technologies of the self yesterday. Foucault is a buzzword, in modern times.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I was refraining from using.
No. I mean, he's not. He's very good, but the point is,
agreed.
How many?
Yeah, I think. Let us also remember that for those of us who have had the privilege, we can afford to sort of dismiss or laugh at education or be cynical about it. But I think there's a huge section of people for whom education is their only hope of social mobility, of acquiring some kind of power in a powerless world. And I think that should be the primary kind of thrust, all said and done, for at least public education. Forget private education for the moment. But public education must aim at providing that kind of currency of power to somebody who comes from a completely, absolutely, oppressed and depressed situation in society. And that's also in context of society that we come from. I mean, there is a whole layering of power, and we happen to be in a position where we can have these kind of international dialogue and so on. But most of our people can't, and they for them this kind of struggle against the oppression of power is a day-to-day reality. For them, what can education do? What should education do? For us, it's okay to keep it oriented towards the capitalist machine and to create jobs and job seekers and job fillers. But how do we negotiate, or how do we articulate that mission of accessing power? For somebody who enters education at absolutely negative, minus level of power. That should be, I think, our emphasis also.
Thank you very much. I want the student to say something.
We had a question from Christu. Am I pronouncing right?
What is the question? Can you read out the question?
Yes. To Professor Lodaya, could you please share your thoughts on how the Arora model of education with progressive ideas and values is possible in a society characterized by social rigidity and exclusion?
He needs money for that.
So, I mean, all I can say right now is that I don't have a kind of, a plan or a business model or anything like that right now. I just have certain ideals and certain values and certain beliefs and hopes. But definitely what I'm advocating when I use the word ashram is not the Brahminical exclusive educational model that we might have learned about, but more in terms of, and that's why I use the image of the Buddha, by the way, and not Dronacharya or something like that. It's a more open-ended, open kind of inclusive, and more self-learning, self-driven learning kind of model. It is not about the guru shoving information down the throats, the knowledge down the throats of the young innocent minds, but in a sense giving them the space and the encouragement to express themselves, to discover and to learn in a safe and protected space. If you ask me how to ensure that it is representative of all sections of society, I don't have an answer. I also wish that it is. So I'm by all means on your side. The education system that I referred to, that I came from, had the kind of systemic model, which was basically ensuring reservations as per the government norms and education institutions. But that's it, and I'm not even sure that I can say that with confidence that was fulfilled or well delivered. So that aside, I don't have an answer to that right now. But as I think Professor Motwani also mentioned, that there are certain instances of these kind of ashram-based or residential schools which have been located in tribal and indigenous areas of the country. Again, I don't have any first-hand experience, so I can't claim to know the answers to these questions. I'm not an educationist. I'm basically an innovator. So my job, my sort of business in life is to come up with ideas, to observe things, to join dots in my head and keep spewing them out. And hopefully some entrepreneur, some policymaker, or somebody like that will actually implement them. I am not an implementer.
Professor Lodaya, would you be happy to include another model and fuse it, the Shinkansen model and the model that you are proposing, which means make it accessible, speedy, connected at the same time? So with the money and mountain, it can be done. Both the models.
I think there's a lot of. I agree. I think there's some kind. There is no fundamental contradiction between a slow and a fast mode.
That's right.
Very frugal and a very, very kind of generously funded or wealthy mode. I think we can look for these kind of combinations, and to think in binary terms is actually, I think, defeating the potential of the future.
I think so. So when you were talking, I thought about kind of fusing these two models and make it more global in nature, and it can be a great partnership of the two.
I just want to respond quickly to Professor Motwani's comment, just to clarify when she asked a question about what I meant by support by institution and resources. I meant validation more than anything else, not just the kind of infrastructure or the physical or material aspect. But I think, and that's what I mentioned earlier in the comment somewhere, is that in today's time, let us accept that the value of education is in the certificate. That's really the primary reason why people go to school and stay in school. If they went for learning, they can get it, much better outside of a school context, as Silky has pointed out. So the transaction that we all are part of by being part of the education system is the validation part. And by holding it in our hands, we have a kind of unique power and control over our students. And I think if we unlock that power and really sort of make it widely accessible and just validate people's knowledge or learning in whatever way that they obtain in our portals, hopefully, rather than outside of it, I think we'd be sort of doing taking a big step forward.
Thank you very much, Professor Lodaya. And with that, I conclude. I hand it over to Teramoto Sensei and say thank you to all the participants and especially the speakers who took their time and spoke to us and very honestly presented their models of thought and ways of thinking and ideas in COVID-19. So let's continue this dialogue. And thank you very much. And let's.
Thank you very much for the speakers to take time to join this session today and sharing with us your insight. It's apparent, obviously, this is an ongoing situation that we face newly, and I believe this became a very good start for all of us to think about the future education. Before we end, I'd like to thank also the participants who are here with us today. I hope you have learned something and we all can apply what we have learned back in our daily lives, which I believe matters the most. I would also like to thank the entire committee before we end, which put this symposium possible. Thank you very much.